If you've seen a movie or a TV show in your lifetime, you've definitely heard a leitmotif. You may not have heard what it's called, but you've definitely heard one. From Star Wars to Harry Potter to any movie or TV show, really, leitmotifs have been used for decades. You've definitely heard the Imperial March. It's one of the most classic examples used for a leitmotif. But what exactly is the definition of a leitmotif? StudioBinder defines a leitmotif as a short recurring musical phrase. They're usually tied to specific themes, including characters and emotions, and they can be used to signify an emotional arc. They're typically introduced early on and then expanded upon throughout the work, be it a movie, TV show, symphony, whatever. Leitmotifs are typically associated with German composer Richard Wagner, who was extremely deliberate with his music, and he considered himself the sole authority on every aspect of his operas. But leitmotifs can actually be traced all the way back to Monteverdi. Leitmotifs in Wagner's work were typically used to signify recurring characters, such as Ride of the Valkyries. Using leitmotifs in films was popularized during the golden age of Hollywood, which is the 1930s, though they later fell out of practice in the 50s and 60s due to sci-fi and thriller movies becoming popular, which focused more on general sound design than leitmotifs. They made a return in the 70s due to John Williams' composition for Star Wars. There is another kind of motif, though, called a remembrance motive, which is a technique that involves the return of previous themes without alteration. So, remembrance motifs have actually existed before leitmotifs. After Wagner was associated with leitmotifs, all of his motifs were called that, even though most of them were actually self-described as remembrance motifs. There's a lot of cool information on leitmotifs that aren't relevant to this essay in this thesis that I used for a lot of this information, so I suggest you go read it yourself. In this essay, I'm going to be focusing on some specific types of leitmotifs and how they are used in the video game Nine Souls. I'm going to be looking at character leitmotifs, emotional leitmotifs, and ones that are used to communicate character evolution. Richard Wagner stated that leitmotifs are guides to feelings, and that is the crux of what I'm going to be talking about today. Before I get into Nine Souls specifically, I need to talk about video game music. Video game music is very similar to movies in that each location, character, emotion, and arc should have their own themes that are encapsulated by the music. However, video game music also needs to take the player's personal experience into account, which is very, very hard to do. The study of video game music, or ludomusicology, is a very new practice, only a few decades old. It's basically an untapped field of research due to how young the field is. Ludomusicologists have to look at centuries of research and apply it to a budding field, video games. And in terms of all human history, video games are a very new form of entertainment, even though it doesn't really feel like it to those of us who grew up with them. So there's a lot of aspects of the medium that we don't have names for and phenomena that have yet to be studied. In an interview with Ariel Gross, the president of Team Audio, who are audio professionals who provide services to dev teams, Gross states that music and games should be modular in nature. Games change with the actions of the players, and music needs to follow those changes and fit the new state of the game. So in order to do their job properly, game composers need to know the game fully. They have to be able to think ahead to what the player is doing and plan accordingly. They also need to have an understanding of the game's themes and general atmosphere. Crucially, music helps tell a game's story, and I believe that Nine Souls, my favorite video game ever right now, does this particularly well. Okay, so quick side note, all of the names in Nine Souls are Chinese, and I don't speak Chinese, so bear with me, please. Okay, so you're probably wondering, if you don't know already, what is Nine Souls? Nine Souls is a Souls-like Metroidvania game by Taiwanese game developers Red Candle Games. Red Candle Games was formed by 6 people originally, but they've since expanded to a team of over 10, I think around 15. Shue, aka Vincent, the main developer of Nine Souls, in an interview with Into Indie Games, described the game as blending Taoist mythology with cyberpunk elements to create something called Taopunk, which is essentially a combination of ancient philosophies and futuristic tech. Nine Souls is based on the Chinese myth of He Yi, a mythological archer. In the myth, the Jade Emperor, the ruler of heaven, has 10 sons. Depending on the interpretation of the myth, these sons decide to cause trouble on purpose by turning into 10 literal suns and started burning the earth. The Jade Emperor naturally freaked out and sent a famous archer named He Yi to stop his children after failing to calm them down himself. He Yi, being an archer, shot down all but one of the sons, leaving one alive after it begged for its life. The Jade Emperor gets really mad because the archer he hired did archery things and killed his kids. You really should have seen this coming, my dude. And as a result, he banished He Yi from heaven along with his wife. So, as a note, this is a very old story, and because of that, it's really hard to find a 100% reliable source. Each source uses a different version of the myth because it's so old and there's so many different interpretations. I used Overly Sarcastic Productions' video on He Yi, which is a pretty clear and concise explanation of one version of the story. You should check them out, they're pretty cool. Okay, so now getting into the actual plot of Nine Souls. There are some major players here that you need to know before we get into it. First up is Solarians, an alien race of humanoid cats that's dying of a disease that's called the Tianhou virus. The literal translation is heavenly punishment, so that's fun. They hail from a planet called Ponglai, and the remaining Solarians live on an island that they launched into space called New Kunlun. The main character is Yi, named after He Yi, who is a fengshi, a Chinese technical specialist like alchemists, fighters, etc., and a former member of the Tiandao Council, who are a group of Solarians that hold a lot of power for the sake of the betterment of society. Yi is on a revenge quest after being betrayed by the rest of the council, we'll get into that later, and Yi's goal is to kill the other 9 souls. Look, it's the name of the game! With the aid of his old friend, a soul that Yi convinced to join his side, and a little human boy named Xuan, and various NPCs, Yi takes down each soul, eventually leading to his mentor, Agong, whose betrayal was the greatest of all. So the composer for Nine Souls is FFXX, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and the soundtrack includes Taiwanese indie band Collage, who did the ending credits song. You should check them out, Collage is really good. Okay, so now we are entering spoiler territory. Spoilers! Spoiler for the rest of the game! I kind of have to get into spoilers, so if you don't want to hear spoilers, leave. For this section, I will be focusing on a specific leitmotif, which is a section of Yi's theme. I'll hold off on playing that use of his theme until later because I need to go over what the presence of his theme means first. So each iteration of Yi's leitmotif follows this pattern. So typically with leitmotifs, you're supposed to introduce the full theme first and then develop it, like with fugues. Nine Souls is very interesting though, in that we never hear the full version of Yi's theme until the end. Every use of his leitmotif is best heard in hindsight. And the first time we ever hear it is during the first boss fight of the game, and it shows up again throughout the first half, although it's played very softly or sometimes not at all. I'll play those parts of the 2 boss themes that have the leitmotif now, and we're going to skip the ones that don't have it for later. These 2 bosses are fought before what I consider to be the turning point of the game. During this half of the game, players are under the impression that Yi is the sole good guy, even though he's clearly a flawed character. He's cold and calculating and does awful things, but he's on the player's side, and the souls seem worse by comparison because they're kind of assholes. After the turning point of the game, Yi's leitmotif gets louder and easier to pick out. Every single boss theme after this has the leitmotif, unlike the first half of the game. This turning point is after you fight Lady Ethereal, the soul of benevolence. This is when a lot of players realize that things are more complicated than we initially thought. Not all of the souls are just evil people or even mean, and you realize as the time goes on that a lot of Yi's actions caused more harm than good. And at this point of the game, my own personal thoughts on the remaining souls besides Agong were, wow, god, these people are sad. In Lady Ethereal's theme, Yi's leitmotif is the entire backing piano part that plays throughout the song. It's easiest to hear in the very beginning. After this, the game's progression depends on the player, but I'll be showing the boss themes in the order that I usually play them in. You have a choice between who to fight next: the Fangs, twin siblings who are the souls of selflessness and integrity, and Ji, an immortal being who is the soul of insight. Agong, the final boss, is interesting because Yi's leitmotif is almost entirely drowned out by the rest of her song. I had to hurt my ears to hear this part, which really doesn't fit the established pattern of getting louder and more prominent after the turning point. This is the final boss, after all. Why isn't Yi's leitmotif playing louder? There's a reason for that. If you reach the neutral ending, you only ever hear Agong's theme during this fight. This is not the ending that the developers intended to be the most satisfying. Yi's character growth is cut off before he can reach his full potential. His arc is incomplete. His theme isn't present in the ending because he hasn't reached his conclusion. However, in the true ending, we finally get to hear that theme, including the leitmotif we've heard throughout the game, in its full dramatic glory. During the true ending, we unlock a secret third phase to Agong's boss fight, and that is when Yi's theme is played, completely overpowering any trace of Agong's theme. So, Agong is Yi's mentor. In her fight, she uses moves that you do as you progress throughout the game. She taught Yi how to fight, she taught him about science, and she significantly influenced his worldview, leading him to desperately reach for a cure for the Tianhuo virus, as well as prolonging Solarian lives. Agong was the one who created Tianhuo. It was an accident, but she did it in her pursuit for immortality. And when Yi found out, he felt betrayed and horrified as his entire family, including his beloved younger sister Hung, died from the virus. All throughout the game, both Yi and Agong refuse to give up on their goals. Yi endlessly pursues vengeance, refusing to acknowledge the awful things he's done, like abducting the human race to use their brains as supercomputers. And Agong chases immortality, refusing to accept the doom of her species that she caused. Agong is written to be a narrative foil to Yi, a dark reflection of him who he could have become if he continued to search for the key to living forever. Basically, Agong is Yi's worst self. This is why, during the third phase of Agong's boss fight, it is Yi's theme that plays, not hers, showing that he has surpassed her. He has overcome the ideals she instilled and reinforced in him. As Yi grows closer to Xuan, who reminds him of Hung, he softens and learns that there are more important things than just staying alive. And he learns to accept responsibility for his actions and the harm that they caused, especially to his people. Yi's theme is the culmination of everything he's learned. It's triumphant, melancholic, and beautiful, and it's a picture of a man shedding the person that he used to be. What does this leitmotif mean, though, aside from Yi's character growth? Well, throughout the game, each soul refuses to accept something. the death of a loved one, their role in things going to shit, the glory days being long gone. Denial and blame are both huge themes in the game. Some blame everyone but themselves, some blame only themselves. Yi was in the former category, placing all the blame for the doom of the Solarians and the pain caused by the Council's efforts to undo it on everyone else. However, at the end of the true ending, Yi has come to accept that he was also at fault for hurting the people he loved. He left his sister behind, their last conversation being an argument. He came up with the idea to launch New Kunlun into space and to put every remaining Solarian, except for a skeleton crew of scientists, to sleep to prevent the progression of Tianhe. And as a result, he left everyone else who couldn't get a seat on New Kunlun to die on Penglai. And unknowingly, he provided the perfect opportunity for Aegong to do some very sinister things that made everything worse in her efforts to help. He did horrible things to Xuanxuan's people, and he directly caused the little boy he cared for to be orphaned. In this ending, Yi has accepted the blame, and is no longer pursuing revenge out of selfishness. In the true ending, he returns the humans to Earth, saving them from the consequences of the Solarians' mistakes. Yi's leitmotif is one that I have taken to calling the acceptance motive. This motive represents the acceptance of blame. Its presence can signify the lack of acceptance, yes, but more than that, it's the build-up of Yi's own acceptance. Aegong's theme doesn't feel like a proper conclusion because, well, it's not. In the neutral ending, Yi's progress is sent all the way back to the start, because he didn't truly bond with not just Xuanxuan, but the rest of the humans. He doesn't accept the death of his species and goes to prolong it, effectively becoming the next Aegong. It doesn't feel right because it isn't. Yi's character arc is very important. Everyone makes mistakes, but Yi's growth shows that no matter how much evil you did, changing for the better matters, and you can set things right if you accept responsibility. And that's something that I think a lot of people need to hear. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, I want to talk about the absence of Yi's motif, which is very interesting. Two souls, Gomong and Jechuan, don't have Yi's motive in their boss themes at all. These two fights take place before the turning point of the game, so its absence isn't really felt if you aren't looking for it. I, however, am insane. I hurt my ears blasting Gomong's theme to hear even a hint of the acceptance motive to no avail. I didn't even try for Jechuan because his theme is so loud by default, I knew I'd just destroy my hearing. Gomong, the soul of equality, is all about control. She's regularly described as a control freak in-game who emphasizes total dominance over her farms. Her theme is even called the Puppeteer, showing that she really is obsessed with micromanaging everything around her, including the mind-controlled humans that she sees as her children. I can't get into that. I cannot. It would take too much time. I believe that Gomong's theme doesn't have the acceptance motive, not because of her lack of acceptance, because every other soul has that problem too, and they have that motive, but because of her obsession with control. Gomong wouldn't let Yi's theme into her song because it's hers. She dominates her area, and that even extends to the non-diegetic music playing during her boss fight. Effectively, just by existing, she said, "Nuh-uh." Jechuan, the soul of discipline, doesn't have the same obsessions as Gomong. However, his fight is unique in that he is the one deliberately antagonizing Yi. He does everything in his power to make Yi angry on purpose, including burning the village of humans that Yi sheltered in after Aegong tried to kill him. I mean, she did kill him, but he regenerates because of some sci-fi shit that I don't have time to explain. Jechuan isn't striving for control, but he exerts it anyway. The fight with him is on his terms and his territory. Whether you fight dirty or honorably, Jechuan is happy because he wants Yi to fight him so that they can both get stronger. In fact, Jechuan is even disappointed that he wins in the first fight with him, where you're meant to lose to progress the plot. This isn't Yi's fight, it's Jechuan's, and that really shows in the intense blaring of electric guitars and the chanting of Jechuan's family motto, "Endure what others cannot, for heroes are forged in agony." The usage of leitmotifs in video games is incredibly important to showing a character's journey. Nine Souls is just an incredible example of how to do it right. There are so many other games that utilize leitmotifs as well. Hollow Knight, my other favorite game, Undertale, any Legends of Zelda game, and they're all really fascinating. The acceptance motive is integral to Yi's character arc and Nine Souls as a whole. I don't think that Wagner and film composers could have anticipated how much their works would influence us in the future. None of them could have predicted the entirely new medium that would emerge, and how much of it would rely on their usage of leitmotifs. It makes me wonder, what will video game music lead us to? What new media will emerge that will take inspiration from great works of art like Nine Souls? We can only wait and see.